So Luther, I think, gave us the formula for how to handle these things. It's you stand on Scripture alone and let the chips fall where they may.
We're on the same side. We may disagree on certain theological issues, but we're on the same side.
Not agree on Calvinism.
No, not at all. And
look how nice we are to each other.
Yeah.
No, I enjoy this and appreciate all you do out there for the Lord.
It's like, you know what? What are you doing? You're spending all your time trying to destroy another Christian because you don't understand what's going on, when you should be out there winning people for Jesus.
We're not supposed to be blind sheep. We're supposed to be Bereans. And so just to, no matter who it is, this goes for everybody.
I'm a big fan of yours. Big fan. It's true. I love watching you and I love hearing what you have to say, and I think you're a great blessing to the body of Christ.
All right, well, welcome to Conversations with Jeff. This is not Jeff. This is Pastor Sam Jones, but Jeff is here, as you can see. How are you doing, Jeff?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Sam. It's really nice to be on the show.
Yeah, it's really great to have the host of the show as the guest to the show that I'm hosting. I don't know. This is really confusing.
Yeah.
But there is a reason why we're doing this. You see, there's an interesting narrative that's going around here, and we're going to clear up some of this stuff and have a conversation about it, because this is the purpose with Conversations with Jeff, is to go into have a conversation, talk about uncomfortable, difficult topics perhaps at times, and maybe even some disagreement and stuff like this. I'm really just interested to learn about this and to really get the narrative out and to get the real story out about what's going on, and it has to do with now is it your uncle?
Technically my uncle-in-law.
Okay, your uncle-in-law.
Yes.
And his establishment.
Yes.
So I'm starting to already kind of go, why are we talking about this again? But it's because it's basically trending on Twitter every time you tweet.
Yeah. I could post, I believe that the Bible is true. It's like, yeah, well, what about your uncle-in-law? And it's like
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's not just that, but sometimes it's when I found when I tweet, I came and I called out compromise, and I remember I was giving Tom Buck a compliment, who at different times, me and Tom Buck have been on certain sides of issues and certain sides not on the same issue or not on the same side of an issue. We've agreed with each other in some things, disagreed with each other, but I was complimenting him. And saying like, hey, this is great, and I was talking about how we need to not compromise and was kind of affirming what he was saying. And somebody jumped in and they're like, yeah, but what about Jeff's uncle? And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Yeah. So I'm really glad that we get this opportunity to talk about this. And so I'll go ahead and start off. What about your uncle-in-law? Okay, just start off with that question. No, he has a certain establishment, and can you give us the name of this establishment? Maybe just a little bit of a background on what this thing is.
Yeah, so it's called the California Institute of Abnormal Arts, and basically it started out as like an underground circus freak show nightclub venue, and he's had it for 20-something years, I guess, in North Hollywood. After I got married, we were living near there, and it was actually while I was attending John MacArthur's church up at Grace Community Church. So I typically I was brought on to run sound for Carl's Place, and usually there'd be bands. Every now and then there'd be a freak show, and which I've seen some pretty crazy things. We'll just leave it at that. And and then that was basically what I was working for some extra cash, extra money, that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, when basically the way all this progressed and the way all this got started was because I was critiquing John MacArthur and because I was critiquing Phil Johnson. Phil Johnson decided to say that I'm compromised because I ran sound for a venue that he claims is a den of the occult, and that thus disqualifies me from having an opinion on John MacArthur. Is basically the progression of the conversation, the progression of thought. So that's the storyline in a gist.
Okay, so this is interesting, and I feel like I need to be honest with everybody as I'm doing this. Jeff, we've known each other for 5 months, 6 months, somewhere in that range. Maybe I might even be a little bit liberal at the time of this recording of how long we've known each other.
Yeah.
So I get on Twitter, and me and you had talked just a little bit about this. So I'd kind of heard a story of your uncle-in-law owning a freak show museum, kind of a thing, event center.
Right.
And I remember like the first time that I retweeted something of yours, or maybe it was our first conversation. I don't remember what it was, but all of a sudden I found out that you have this great following on Twitter, and people are just going and asking me these questions. I'm going, I have no idea what you're talking about, because they're calling, do you denounce the den of iniquity? They just start off with that. And I'm like, well, I've never been in a den of iniquity. I'm like, well, are you talking about like Planned Parenthood? That sounds like a den of iniquity. I mean, there's a lot of places that can be called den of iniquity. Yeah. And I'm like, I told him, I said, hey, I'm afraid to do a Google search on, typing in den of iniquity for what might come up.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm not going to look it up. So I have no idea what you're talking about here. And they were saying, well, do you denounce it? I'm like, well, I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to denounce something I don't know, but I denounce a lot of dens of iniquity, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I also need to be honest, because this is something that I have an experience in that most people probably don't. I'm part gypsy, and my grandpa and grandma had a freak show. So, I mean, that's something we can kind of relate on in one sense. Now they were unsaved. My grandma ended up getting saved and different things like that. And I've never been on the freak show. I don't have a third arm or something like that to go in and be on the freak show. But yeah, so I mean, there is kind of an interesting connection. So I'm really interested in discussing this a little bit further. But first of all, when we're looking at this idea, this is a weird thing to talk about, okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here going, there's so many logical fallacies that I'd like to address and things like that. But I'm trying to be in the middle here as much as I can be. This is very difficult. So this den of iniquity, you worked there. How long did you work at the den of iniquity? Not a den of iniquity. Sorry, it's the California Institute
of Abnormal Arts.
Of Abnormal Arts.
Or as Carl likes to answer the phone, the CIA.
The CIA.
Yes.
CIA. How long were you an operative for the CIA?
10 months.
10 months.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I ran sound. Eventually, I started booking some bands, and just because I was trying to help him out with running things and learning and all that kind of stuff. But basically, my job was running sound in a sound booth that was inside, essentially, I want to say a box or underneath a platform where it was about 4 feet tall, and I'm 6'3". And so that was basically my job space for about 3 or 4 hours every Friday and Saturday night.
Okay, that's kind of that'd be a little tough, I think there. So you ran sound for him for about 10 months. Mm-hmm. Okay. The thing about the space is it's a combination of a museum and like a performance arts place, right? Maybe 100 people can show up. Like that's like the max the room can handle, right? And he has, it's basically like if you were to go to like an old school circus touring around, they would always have like oddities and things like that. That's basically what the outside of his place is. So he's got like a dead clown that was buried in his Shriner's outfit. He's got he actually does have an actual plaster footprint of Bigfoot that runs in the family. We could maybe get into that later. And I do believe in Bigfoot, if that helps anybody's, trustworthiness of me, Yeah, I mean, he's got Fiji mermaids. He's got a lot of different things, and it's one of those things where you always are thinking, is this real or is this fake? It's kind of like mind bending and that sort of thing.
if you look at Pulpit and Pen's website and their critique of me, they say because he has a dead clown, now I'm embracing what was it? Evangelistic necromancy, whatever that is. So
that's an interesting leap right there.
Yeah.
Now let's kind of jump off on that evangelistic necromancy there.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define necromancy according to the Bible and maybe the occult and what it's talking about when it talks about witches and wizards and things like that? I've got some ideas on this, but how would you define it?
Well, I mean, clearly, any kind of behavior or anything like that within the occult or witchcraft or anything like that is obviously a sin. It's one of those things where it's like, we shouldn't have to say, I believe that the occult is sinful, but it's still there. It's the reality, and I think that what ends up happening is things are taken out of context, redefined, and then attributed to you. And we see this all the time in politics. They'll take one little thing you said, they'll take it out of context, they'll spin it around and say you're a racist. It's like it's to me that's basically the same kind of strategy that's being used here. And I think it's important that we do understand that all of this started out with Carl and his venue and his club and that sort of thing before he was really walking with the Lord. And then over the last few years, he's really turned his life around and has been walking with the Lord. And there's clear cut fruit and evidence of his faith. And I think one of the decisions that he intentionally made was, okay, we can either close up shop and I could leave and then could just go find another job, or I could stay in this world and then be a light in darkness. And so he chose the latter. Does that mean that we necessarily agree with every decision that he makes? No. But at the same time, he's family. He is a Christian. He does preach the gospel. That doesn't invalidate any criticism, but it's still the reality and the facts of the matter.
So let's pick up right around with this idea here of what you just said, that he goes and he wants to use this as an evangelistic opportunity, essentially is what I've been doing. I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything like that, but that's kind of what I felt like you were communicating.
Yeah.
Is the CIA, because I can't remember what that stands for. I'm sorry.
We'll just go with the CIA.
Yeah, the CIA is that a listed as a ministry? Okay, is it on the same level as, we'll say, Pulpit and Pen, Grace to You, Worldview Weekend, the Shining Light Ministries, the Gatekeepers? Would it be classified in the same way as what these ministries are classified? Does he view it the same way? Is this, it's Carl is the guy's name who's in charge of it?
Right.
Is he listed as Evangelist Carl, Pastor Carl, Missionary Carl? What is this how it's being presented?
No. It's not. It's a ministry in the sense of, just as if I was going to my secular job and I was sharing my faith when I come into contact with somebody who's not a Christian. It's not an organized ministry in the same way that like a Grace to You would be, or the Shining Light Ministries would be, or that sort of thing. It would be the equivalent of, you run a movie theater and then you interact with people and maybe you share your faith with somebody that comes in, and because you started and you had a conversation with somebody, that to me that would be the equivalent like scenario. Yes, you would consider that ministry. No, you wouldn't consider that a ministry. That would be like an organized, we're designing this to specifically be a way that a church is going to evangelize to the world. And I think that there is nuance there, but there also does need to be that distinction.
Right. No, I totally agree. So there was a point in time in my life when I didn't know what was coming up next for my life. I got done with an internship, and I didn't know what was coming up next. And I turned in prayer, turned to God, and started praying. And I said, Lord, if whatever you want me to be, I will be. If it's going into full-time ministry, I'll do that. If it's being a burger flipping, I'm not saying a flipping evangelist, but a burger flipping evangelist at McDonald's, I will gladly do that. Now, I wouldn't have gone around saying I'm evangelist Sam Jones if I was working at McDonald's, but I've been sharing the gospel at McDonald's my everyday life, being a Christian wherever God put me. And that's what you're saying Carl's attempt is that where God has placed him, that's where he's going to go and share the gospel.
Right.
Not the idea of he's not saying this isn't a CIA church.
Right. And I think this leads us to a certain degree of an interesting kind of theological point of understanding what is ministry. Because I think one of the things that oftentimes we get confused and it gets kind of misconstrued within the church is that it's only the pastors that are doing ministry. Whereas in all reality, to a certain degree, we're all just believers. We just have different roles within the church. And I think that like you wouldn't say that you're the only person in your church that does ministry and everybody else just watches you, right? And
I sure hope not.
Yeah. like your job as a pastor is to equip your church to go out into the world and do ministry. Like that's your job as a pastor. Whereas I think in the American church, what we do is part of it is this entertainment culture, but we sit back in church and then we sit and we watch you do ministry, and then we go home and then we come back the next week and we sit down in church and we watch you do ministry. And I think that that's where a lot of, to a certain degree, some of this misconstrued perspectives can come from, is because we're all supposed to be doing ministry everywhere we go. It doesn't matter whether we work in the entertainment industry or we work, flipping burgers, or we, are starting a company. Like we're all in ministry. It's just we have different roles within the church.
Right. No, I totally agree 100%. I think that's a very good distinction to make, to understand, because we are supposed to be a body of Christ working together, not just watching some people work. And that's important to understand. The reason I was asking this question about the organization itself, CIA, is because that seems to be a narrative on Twitter that hey, he thinks that this is an evangelistic ministry. Mm-hmm. Now, from what I'm understanding, what I'm hearing you say is that you're saying it's not an evangelistic ministry as in the place, it's the person who is evangelizing at a place. And so in reality, it would be nothing different than, let's not be coy about it, okay? It's the Grace to You crowd a lot of times that are going out there, the MacArthur robots that are sitting there attacking you on these kind of things. And, we can even go and say nice things about MacArthur, and, we must always hate MacArthur. But these guys are coming out after you, and they're saying this. They're generally of the crowd, and if they're truly following MacArthur, they have to be consistent with MacArthur's teaching, I would think. And this is something I actually really agree with and really like MacArthur's study on this is on drinking. MacArthur comes out and he does this word study on drinking. The only words coming to mind is the Greek word for dispensation, and but nonetheless, here it doesn't matter. The Greek word for wine, and he goes and he takes it and he shows that the alcoholic content isn't the same as to what we would call wine today, and we don't need to break down all this. But essentially, if you came down to it, he's saying drinking is a sin for the alcoholic beverages. Now, what they would then go and have to say, if they're being consistent, that it's a sin to work at CIA and to go and be evangelizing there. It's also a sin to be a high school busboy at Buffalo Wild Wings. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you feel like that would be an equivalent argument, or do you think I'm trying to straw man them? But I don't know. You're the one who's supposed to be answering these questions, not me. So.
No, well, here's the thing, and again, this comes down to, in my opinion, intellectual honesty. If you're going to have a general principle, it has to be able to be generally applied. And so you could say, oh, well, you're just taking that example to the extreme. But if it's a general principle, it should be able to be taken to the extreme, and it would hold up. Otherwise, you have to adjust your general principle. I mean, the same could be said of somebody who serves alcohol at, let's say, Olive Garden. The same could be said of should a college student not get a job at a gas station because they sell cigarettes?
Right.
The same argument could be made. So then the question is, how do we as Christians live in the world but not be of the world? How can we still be interacting with the lost if we're completely separated from the lost? And I think that there's a fine line of endorsing sin and promoting sin and being around sin. And that's kind of one of those distinctions that I think that we do need to make as Christians, because I feel like what ends up happening is it becomes this game of association, and it becomes this game of, well, you took a picture with so-and-so, so that must mean that you endorse every single thing that they say. I mean, I don't even hold John MacArthur to that standard with a lot of the people that he hangs out with, but they'll turn around and do that to us while complaining that I'm doing that to MacArthur. It's this
Right.
it's this weird conundrum.
It is definitely a weird conundrum, and in looking at that, so you're okay. So back to the whole story of CIA.
Mm-hmm.
Your work there for 10 months.
Yep.
Okay. How are you currently employed by CIA?
I have nothing to do with them except that I still talk to Carl because we are family, and but yeah, I don't work for them. I don't do anything of what I did. It's been since the last time I worked for them. It's probably been a good 7 years ago. Yeah, it's been quite a while.
Okay. So it's been 6 or 7 years ago since you worked with them,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just kind of a little bit hard to process here. For the ridiculous level is just kind of through the roof on some of these things that I've heard on Twitter now, because I'll be honest, I didn't totally know the story or timeline until like just right now.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of going like, when you were first telling me this, I'm like, well, it's an interesting story. So it's the idea of like, I care for the fact that it's interesting, but I'm like going, I really don't care what your uncle-in-law does for a living or that you ran sound for him. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Like I'm going, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of when it came to the idea of coming on podcast network and things like that, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. Now the Bigfoot thing, I was like, well, okay, this is kind of interesting, but, but we're talking about something that happened 6 or 7 years ago that you worked for a company. Now I understand there's a little bit closer connection because of the relationship, but I'm sitting here going, you were never a part of a freak show, were you?
Not last I checked. I'm sure somebody could misconstrue something, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you move sound levels up and down.
Yeah. No, I also did turn on and off lights. I just want to be completely out in the open. I did do the lights as well.
Oh, well, that changes some things.
Yeah.
Let me think about this now.
Yeah.
No. I mean, this seems like it's kind of a crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with this, and I don't want to put you in like a super compromising position with your family. So I understand this, but
yeah.
What would be some things that you disagree with Carl as to how he does some things?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I've never liked that. Okay, so basically, to back up a little bit, the way that he runs his venue is that it's an event space, right? So what ends up happening is performers will come in and they'll essentially rent out the space, and then they'll come in and perform. So he hasn't really drawn a lot of lines in the kind of acts that would come in and perform. So we've never been the biggest fan that he allows like burlesque acts to come in there, right? I mean, clearly I would not agree with that, but at the same time, I get from his perspective. To him, it would be the equivalent of a hotel space that rents out their ballrooms. That doesn't mean that they endorse every single person or every single event that comes in and rents out their hotel space. And I feel like in his mind, that's how he sees his venue. is that he's renting it out. Somebody is just coming in and they're going to perform and put on a show and whatever it is. That's not an endorsement by him of everything that they do and believe and say from stage.
Right. So, this is actually kind of an interesting idea here, because this is really what our culture is going over with the idea of being a platform or a publisher. And so essentially he's saying that he is a platform and not a publisher.
Right.
And so therefore there is no endorsement. It is just being simply a platform.
Right.
Much like Facebook's not.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so, now, that's in saying this here, I'm more just describing what's going on, because I'll be upfront and honest here. I would not own CIA.
Right.
I wouldn't do it.
Right.
Like I said, I've got quite a bit of connection into freak show things and carnival life and different things like that from relatives. I wouldn't own something out on the carnival. I wouldn't own a freak show. I would go and separate from that. So I disagree with what he's doing there. But I'm sitting here going, I believe that needs to be an area of personal conviction, not an area of dogma necessarily. Now, there are certain things out there. I mean, I would sit here and tell people, there are certain professions that are sinful. You shouldn't be a drug dealer. You shouldn't be a prostitute. You shouldn't be all kinds of different things. But I'm sitting here going, I think that is still up to individual soul liberty on owning a freak show museum and event center.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, and I think that part of the thing and part of the way that things have been misconstrued in the sense of like what my position is when it comes to all of this is that I think that they take the fact that I will endorse Carl as a believer and as a Christian as saying that I endorse every single decision that he makes. And I feel like I would never hold anybody to that standard. I get a lot of criticism for criticizing guys like John MacArthur and Phil Johnson and that sort of thing. But but I'm not holding John MacArthur to this standard of I think that he believes. Let's take that Shepherd's Conference Q&A session for example, right?
Okay.
He said I'm not going to fight my friends. Does that mean that he believes everything that Al Mohler teaches? No. It just means that he's not willing to draw that line in the sand and be a stickler when it comes to that. And so I think, like, I don't hold MacArthur to that standard. What he should have done is he should have drawn the line in the sand and said that's wrong. That doesn't mean that he can't be friends with Al Mohler. Doesn't mean that they can't talk on the phone. Doesn't mean that maybe even hypothetically they could still do events together as long as that line is drawn in the sand and they're very clear cut. Like, Al, come on, publicly, got to deal with this. You know what I mean? And I feel like that standard applies here as well. Is that just because I endorse Carl as a believer, I've seen growth in him. I've seen the fruit. I've seen him preach the gospel. I've spoken to people that have been saved because of him preaching the gospel that come out of some really, really dark stuff. Like, I'm not going to say, Carl, you need to stop preaching the gospel to those people. That doesn't mean I endorse everything, but he is still saved and he is preaching the gospel.
So can you just give a clear definition of exactly what you mean by you endorse him as a believer or as a Christian?
Right. Well, I would say that I've seen having many conversations with him and seeing how he has grown in his faith and seeing how much he loves the Lord, how much he loves people, and just the drastic change in his life. Any sane person can tell that there's been a drastic change in his life and that he's walking with Christ. So that's all that I would mean by that.
So basically all you're saying with that is that you're saying, I believe he's a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like I would say, Sam, I think you're a Christian. That doesn't mean that I know your innermost heart or something along those lines, but I'm just saying I've seen the evidence.
Right. Well, we've talked about this several times. We have some doctrinal differences, and yet we're still friends.
Wait,
right?
We do. I'm gonna have to reconsider you being on this podcast network.
Oh, no, I forgot. I did not disclose to you that I believe that Adam had a belly button. Oh man,
that's it. Let's shut this down right now.
Oh yeah, no. but no, we've talked about some different things, and that's one thing that I really appreciate about your podcast, Conversations with Jeff. Which, by the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed, you need to subscribe to Conversations with Jeff, the GK Podcast Network. I'm not sure what's the name of it on iTunes.
Yeah, I think we're going with the GK Podcast Network, and I think we're sticking with the GK, make that kind of the branding and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Right. So you need to subscribe to it on iTunes and SoundCloud.
And the key thing is, like, when you subscribe to the GK Podcast Network, you're not only subscribing to Conversations with Jeff, you're also subscribing to Shining Light Podcast, all just with one click of subscribe.
Right. There is nothing better than this.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything better.
Same here.
But no, look at this. This is an interesting thing when you look at the idea of endorsing somebody as a Christian. All you're saying is you believe they're a Christian. You're not saying you agree with their doctrine. You're not saying you agree with their decisions. You're not saying you even agree with their vocation. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you disagree or anything like that, but I'm just saying that's not publicly what you're saying. And we're not talking about an organization that is a that is a ministry, as an organization, even if he is doing ministry there, as in personal ministry. We're talking about just an organization. And I know I'm probably oversimplifying it for the other side, and I know that's probably a valid criticism of what I just did. But sometimes we need to take it to its simplest form to see, okay, even if you disagree with what Jeff is doing, does that completely discredit what he's saying on this about his uncle-in-law's vocation? I've got some uncles that I really don't agree with their vocation. In fact, I've got an uncle that, just like what you're saying here, lived a life of sin. In fact, last I knew, he was a pot farmer or on the carnival, not for sure which one. But in the last few years, he had a pot farmer in a state where that's legal, just to make that clarification. Yeah. He had a radical change in his life and claims Christ. Now, do I agree with what he's doing? No. Mm-hmm. Do I see that he's saved? Yes.
Right.
And that's basically what you're saying here?
Yeah, and I think, again, to bring this back to the theological perspective, is that there?
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, well, there is oftentimes, and especially with this crowd, and again, I'm saying this because I come from this crowd. Like this, these are my people. These people that are criticizing me are my people. But there's a misconstruing between justification and sanctification, and I think a lot of times what you hear is no Christian would ever do X, Y, or Z. Whatever that is. And I feel like what ends up happening is they're saying that the sanctification process, which is us becoming more like Christ, that's an instantaneous, you're now going to be essentially the perfect Christian. They'll always have the asterisk of course you're still going to sin, but no Christian would ever do X, Y, or Z. And then you look at Scripture and you're like, David had an affair with a woman, killed her husband, and then took her as his wife. I mean, I don't think that was proof that he wasn't saved. Like, right. He messed up horrifically. It was still sin, but that didn't invalidate his justification. And I think that we have to be careful with applying the principles of sanctification to our justification. And I think that's an interesting conversation that I think that we as the church in general should be having. So, and I think maybe to get it in one phrase, perhaps, is lordship salvation. Yeah. Now, you are a lordship salvation guy, correct? I am a lordship guy. Yeah, which makes a lot of these conversations interesting.
Right. That does make these conversations interesting. So how do you bring those two ideas together of lordship salvation? Because I'm just guessing that there's probably some misconception around the term, or is in what you're meaning by the term. That's my assumption.
Yeah.
But I'm going to turn it over to you here. How do you justify the idea of lordship salvation in one side, and then the other side of somebody who's not completely living for the Lord, and yet claiming to be saved.
Right. Well, so I think that what ends up happening is there's different degrees of lordship salvation, and so you can have and by lordship salvation, what we mean is that when you become a Christian, you become justified. What ends up happening is that there's what the people in the lordship camp call, or like the easy believism, which is basically how all you have to do is place your faith in Christ. There has to be no repentance from sin, and you don't have to change anything in your life as long as you made that decision that one time. It doesn't matter about anything else, and then now you're saved. Whereas I think that the lordship guys can take things too far, and I'll explain how. You've got John MacArthur type lordship salvation, and then you've got John Piper lordship salvation. Now, John Piper takes lordship salvation to the extreme in his view on final salvation. So what he says is that there's justification, which is when you place your faith in Christ.
Okay.
And then you have sanctification, which is basically where you're earning your final salvation. So if you're not living a life, essentially, even though he would say if you're justified, you're going to be sanctified and you're going to receive salvation, he splits those up to where you're essentially spending your entire life earning your salvation. And I've heard quotes from several of these guys that say that I can never be sure of my salvation because of my sins. I mean, I've heard Billy Graham say that. I've heard John Piper. I've heard even like R.C. Sproul imply it about somebody else. It's this idea that your sin, or whether it's a lack of sin or too much sin, has direct impact on whether you're going to receive salvation. And I think what ends up happening is you're mixing it all up. Is that in my opinion, you have justification, which is when you place your faith in Christ. As soon as you place your faith in Christ, you are saved. Now you're going to spend your entire life going through the sanctification process, which is the process of the Holy Spirit making you more Christ-like throughout the rest of your life. Now the key distinction here is that I don't believe that means that you're going to be instantaneously perfect. It doesn't mean that you're never going to mess up. It means that you're going to be gradually becoming more Christ-like. Now, for some people, that may be very gradual in the beginning or almost non-existent. And then maybe you're going to grow more later on in your life. But there's always going to be that trajectory. I just think that we have to be careful with saying that no Christian would ever do X, Y, and Z, because we see examples of people that clearly are saved throughout the Bible that messed up way more horrifically than I think we've ever seen any Christian in modern history behave. And I think that we have to be careful, because I think we're mixing up these two and then just combining them all into one. Like sanctification and justification are both combined what's making us saved, as opposed to just Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. It's important. Like, it literally says not of works. So why are we saying that works are what gets you into heaven? That's what we have to be careful with.
Right. And so I kind of struggle with this whole lordship salvation thing, because there's so many different terms with it. I generally claim I'm not a lordship salvation guy. I hold to that, but I sit here and I preach vehemently the idea of for by grace you saved through faith, then of yourselves, it's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. But then I go and say faith produces works. Real faith produces real works. There are real evidences to our salvation. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that you have total evidence. That doesn't mean that we're always showing evidence, but that there is some evidence. And I think that's really what you're getting at. And with all that. Now, one more question on soteriology, and then I kind of want to move into a little bit of how this works out and plays out with some ecclesiology, if I can remember the questions I just had. Yeah. If not, we'll skip that part. Sure. But so what you're hitting on here with lordship salvation, it really kind of brought up some ideas of the last point in Tulip, perseverance of the saints. Now, would this be maybe what some of these guys, these extreme lordship guys, are saying, are leaning towards more of a perseverance of the saints, as opposed to maybe a true eternal security, in the sense of perseverance of the saints is focusing in on those who are Christ will persevere, as in the idea of eternal security, simply put, is just once saved, always saved.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's crossover in that. So I'm not trying to denounce one side or the other, but
Right.
But which side is emphasized? Is that kind of what they're getting at with these kind of things?
Yeah, and I think, again, these terms become interchangeable in a lot of these kinds of conversations. So when I look at like the perseverance of the saints, there's like one of my pastors growing up, he would call it the preservation of the saints because it's God preserving us, not us preserving ourselves. But what to me, what that principle is talking about is that once you place your faith in Christ, you are saved. Like, until the end, you're going to heaven. What ends up happening, though, is a lot of times what these people are doing is they're saying that there's the perseverance of the saints, which means that you're going to persevere throughout your entire life, which means that you're going to essentially be the perfect Christian. And that thus, if you're not persevering right this second and behaving exactly as you should be, you have reason to doubt your faith. And I think that we have to be really careful with that, because the Bible clearly does say that we can have assurance of our salvation. But when you look at a lot of these extreme lordship guys, and again, I want to say extreme because I am a lordship guy, but I don't take it to this extreme, is that a lot of these guys are like 95% sure that they're saved. You know, and it's like, no, the Bible clearly states we can be sure of our salvation. And it's not based in us. It's in spite of us. It's not based on our works or our good behavior. It's in spite of our works and behavior. And that's the whole point of the cross, is that we can't do anything to save ourselves, in the sense of our sin makes us to where we deserve hell and we deserve eternal punishment. And the only way we get to heaven is because of Christ's penalty and him dying on the cross for our sins, paying that penalty for our sins. We're not getting to heaven because of us. We're getting to heaven because of him. Like, if it was up to us, every single one of us deserve hell. And to me, that should be so extremely humbling that I don't deserve this gift. I don't deserve eternal life. The only reason why I'm getting it is because God gave me something that I don't deserve. And even now, I still don't deserve it. Even now as a Christian, we're all still messing up. We're still all sinning. It's not like any of us are perfect. And so we have to remember that different people are starting at different points. Different people, you know, when they became a Christian, some people may have been way more drastically sinning than maybe I was, or vice versa. And maybe they're starting here, and I'm starting here. Clearly, I'm going to be, quote unquote, more sanctified in the beginning of my salvation experience right here, and they're slowly catching up. Just because they're behind me doesn't mean that they're not saved. And we have to show grace, and we have to be trying to reach these people and help them in their walk with Christ, not just try to say, hey, you're messing up too much, you're not saved.
Right. And I guess that does play into, even, you know, to stick with the Calvinist theme here, total depravity. Looking in this and saying total depravity, it's not sitting here saying totally depraved as in people will always do the worst thing, but the idea that we're never doing something good is essentially that idea.
Yeah.
There. And looking at that, though, that means that there are some people who are doing worse than others, and that's kind of what you're communicating.
Yeah.
With this idea of kind of the lordship salvation that some people are impressing, saying Carl must have to be saved. The idea of as soon as he got saved, he had to quit sinning. But once again, I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah,
I admit that.
But to be fair, it is kind of the gist of the complaints.
Right. If we're going to hold that true, and I know you don't really have the answer for this because I'm not asking the people who are making this claim, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question anyway. How would church discipline work, or why would we need church discipline or any passages on church discipline if Christians got saved? Well, people got saved and then they became Christians, and then they never sinned anymore.
What I mean, the whole premise of church discipline is to discipline the church. Like, it's in the name. Like, we're not disciplining the unchurched. It's not unchurched discipline. It's church discipline. I mean, you look through the New Testament. I mean, Paul is consistently talking to the church and telling them to stop doing disgusting things over and over and over again. Now, he's not saying Go into your unsaved pagan communities and tell them to stop doing these horrific things. He's telling the believers, stop, whatever it is, idolatry, or stop bringing in your old idolatrous habits. Stop, X, Y, and Z. I think the thing is that, like, Paul, when he's consistently writing to them, he's calling them out for their repeated sins that they were doing. We see it in Revelation, we see it in the epistles, and if we're immediately justified, sanctified, and thus, what they're saying, essentially glorified in the sense of we're now practically perfect with minor asterisks of sin, it's like, so really, what's the point of all the epistles? Literally. Right. Literally, the epistles are calling out horrific behavior. Right. Are each one of those people no longer justified? And again, this isn't a justification in the sense of justifying bad behavior, but I think it's the theological point of understanding our salvation and understanding our pride, I think, because a lot of times, when you look at the Pharisees, they would list off all these behaviors that you have to obey, and then they turn around and say, look, you're not obeying it as much, so clearly you need to fix your life, or else you're not saved. And then Jesus comes and says, my burden is easy. And it's like there was this drastic change, because our salvation is no longer dependent on us. It's dependent on him in spite of ourselves. And that's the thing that I keep honing in on, but it's important that we understand that, because I feel like that's missing in today's church to a certain degree.
Right. So let me give you kind of a quick fire, and you tell me if you endorse this, or maybe we should just say agree with it or disagree with it, because
sure.
These are some of the things that have been brought up to me on Twitter as accusations as to why I shouldn't associate with you, Jeff.
Okay.
For those listening at home, like I said, this isn't me making this stuff up. This is from things on Twitter. Okay.
This kind of reminds me of, like, it's going to be like Jimmy Kimmel's late night show where he's having all the celebrities come on and read mean tweets. Is that basically what this scenario is going to be?
Well, I'm actually not going to read them, but
okay, yeah.
But yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Hey, by all means.
Do you endorse mannequin pornography?
Absolutely not. I don't even know what that is, but no, it sounds horrific.
Yeah. Hey, like I said, yeah. Do you endorse the occult?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Do you endorse, let me think here, there was another really, really interesting one that was presented. Do you, do you endorse dead clowns? The storing of keeping dead bodies, I think is what it was. But I think you described it was a dead clown there.
Yeah,
at the beginning. But
to me, that's one of those things. It's like, I don't really care.
Yeah,
it's an interesting experience to see it.
I mean, if you had the opportunity, would you get one to put in your living room?
I wouldn't put it in my living room. No, that would be
yeah, creepy. It wouldn't make sense. It would be a dead room then, huh?
Yeah.
I think those are the three main ones that kind of has repeatedly come up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mannequin pornography was really one where I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to these people right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think a lot of this comes down to, we also have to remember that as Christians, we may be around non-Christians that behave poorly. If we are actually getting in there, that doesn't mean that we participate in sin or in poor behavior, but we're supposed to be in the world. We're supposed to be talking to people. And my only point that I had with Carl is that he's actually in there talking to people with the actual gospel, to people that are actively involved in the occult, that are like, literally, there's a brand new huge Scientology center that's kitty corner from his place. He's running into them all the time. He's literally dealing with people that have been dealing with Masonic rituals, and they've been dealing with the occult. They've been dealing with demonic oppression. I mean, like they're hardcore into these like death metal demonic rock bands, and people in the entertainment industry. Like there's a lot of really bad dark stuff that goes on in Hollywood. Now, if all you're going to do is you're going to go to your church where you're dressed in a suit and tie, clean cut, and you're not going to associate with those non-Christians because of how evil they are, how are you ever going to reach them? They're pissed off at you. They don't want to go into your church, because they feel out of place. So they're going to go the complete opposite direction. And this isn't a seeker-sensitive kind of thing like, oh, we need to stop wearing suit and ties to church and stop having an orchestra perform at our church. But there's still that principle of, we're called to go into the world. We're not told to bring the world into the church in order to hear the gospel. And I think that whatever it is you want to say about Carl's decisions are fine. I'm not going to fight with you on your personal conviction, but I think the principle still comes down to he's actually in the world and actually preaching the gospel, and people are actually being saved. So you can critique these other things, but you still have to acknowledge that people are actually getting saved out of like literally demonic, occultic oppression because he's being faithful and he's preaching the gospel.
Yeah. Now, I don't think that everybody needs to go and open up a freak show museum and an event center and to go and to do that. So I
just want to clarify too. I don't have any plans of doing that with the GK. So just so we're clear.
Well, my family just quit supporting it because that's what they were holding out for, was they were wanting to get into the museum. No.
Yeah.
But with that being said, it's not that we have to go and to do those kind of things, but the principle that you're hitting on is go to the world and not to be of the world, but to be in the world. But it's not really inviting someone to church is great. If you invite people to my church, I preach the gospel every Sunday. That's not the only thing I preach, but I make sure it's presented just in case somebody does do this. But that's not really fulfilling the Great Commission. Fulfilling the Great Commission is going, and it's not even just getting people saved. It's also discipling them, which would be a whole other podcast. But it's going out and it's witnessing to the world. I know I've had pastors look at me and hey, if you came to our church, nobody thinks we're seeker sensitive. If you hear me preach, nobody thinks I'm seeker sensitive when I preach. The favorite insult that I've ever gotten was that I was a prosperity preacher, and I was going, man, I must be really bad at that. But I've gone and had pastors ask me, how do you get invited to the unsaved people's house? And I realized the big issue is not that the person hasn't gone to an unsaved person's house, but they don't even have a relationship with unsaved people to be invited to their house. I've been to been to places where I'm going, I don't agree with what's going on. I don't agree with these people. I don't endorse anything as to what's going on, but I'm here to minister to them. Now, I also understand there is an issue with association. So like I said, I wouldn't own CIA.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I would stand on the whole thing.
Right.
But I'm also reminded of D.L. Moody's quote, and I'm going to loosely paraphrase it. Somebody came to him and they said, "Sir, I don't like your method of evangelism." And his response was, "Well, I don't like my method of evangelism sometimes either. What's your method?" And they said, "Well, I don't have one." And he said, "Well, I sure like my method of evangelism better than yours."
Yep.
My way of doing something better than your way of not doing something, or something to that effect.
Yeah, well, and I think kind of going along with that too is that we have to be careful. And again, I'm not saying, okay, let's all go out and we're going to start freak show nightclubs, or we're going to invite non-Christians to come perform at our venue that may be into some deep dark stuff. I'm not saying that by any means, but we still have to be associating with non-Christians. We still have to be building relationships with non-Christians. And a lot of the things that the non-Christians are doing are not things that we agree on. I mean, I have friends that are gay. I have friends that are, living with their, somebody who's not their spouse. Like you have friends that, I've got friends that drink too much. I've got friends that do all those kinds of things. But if I drew that line in the sand and said, I can't associate with you because you're drinking too much or you're doing X, Y, and Z, how will I ever have that conversation with them of, hey, you know what? You know, this is sin. God has a standard. God, you can be saved from this sin and you can have eternal life. But how are you going to have that conversation with somebody if you're not willing to have a relationship with them? And the thing that I think that we as Christians have to remember is that and again, this is my opinion, a lot of people will disagree with me, but non-Christians are not the enemy. They're a mission field. Now, I would say the people that are, let's say, religious leaders of false religions, or people that are like the really big promoters, we could say those people are the enemy. But the everyday non-Christian that is sinning, they're not the enemy. I'm not going to disassociate from them because they're behaving the way that their depraved heart is leading them to behave. I'm going to try to build a relationship with them, show them Christ's love, and preach the gospel. That doesn't mean that I'm giving them a pass on their sin. It means that I expect them to sin. They're lost. They don't have the Holy Spirit in their life. And so we have to remember that we shouldn't treat them like the plague. We need to treat them like the mission field, and it may take years and years and years of building that relationship and constantly talking and praying and dealing with things and being the right example before God even opens their eyes and they come to Christ. And I think that that's something that we have to remember as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I remember a couple of years ago, I was playing basketball at a church basketball league, and I'm not 6'3", so I was sitting on the bench because they didn't want me out on the floor. I'm 5'7", and and a guy sitting next to me, and I mean, this is a church league, right? Mm-hmm. And he's sitting there cussing and cussing and cussing and cussing and cussing, and he's realizing I'm not. Now, I never say anything. I never say anything if somebody's cussing around me. He had no idea that I was a pastor or anything like that. And he kind of turned and he looked at me. He said, "Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be cussing in a church." And I said, "Well, you know, God can hear you in a church as well as He can hear you anywhere else." And my place was maybe to plant the seed of, you know, cussing's maybe not something we should do. Right. And to that degree, and what he was doing, and he goes, "Well, that's true." And he goes, "Bleepity bleep bleep bleep," because he took it the other way of well, if God hears me out there, He's going to hear me here too. So who cares? Yeah. And you know, but through that, if I would have gone and been, "Oh, I don't want to talk to that guy. I don't want to be around that guy," I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and to do. We did many Bible studies with him, evangelistic Bible studies, invest God's word in him, and everything like that. It led to a great relationship after that, and that's just an incredible thing to look at that. It's not a toleration of sin, but we shouldn't be surprised or disassociate with unsaved people because of their sin. Right. And that's where I stand at on the issue. Now, I mean, when it comes to the CIA, I don't know. This is a weird thing, I guess, to look at, and I've never seen somebody be attacked so much for their uncle-in-law's position, or thing that they've owned. So I guess any more thoughts on that? Because I think we've or anything that you could think of that needs to be brought up. You've probably been told a lot more than I have. Yeah. So
well, you know, I think the thing that we need to remember is that these attacks that are being used are a strategy that's being borrowed from the political realm, which, you know, we've seen Democrats do this to Republicans over and over and over again. I mean, we saw them say that Mitt Romney is a racist. Now, we can say all kinds of things about Mitt Romney. I mean, he's a Mormon, he's not a Christian, he had the precursor to Obamacare. I get there's a lot of ways you can critique him. But that doesn't mean that you make these personal slanderous attacks based off of one little thing taken out of context. We've seen Democrats do this to Republicans constantly. And then we saw, for the first time, at least that I can remember, Trump turn around and do this towards the Democrats. And that turned a lot of Christians off, is because he turned around and he did it to Hillary. I mean, some of it may have been warranted, some of it probably wasn't. I mean, we saw him totally, you know, slander Ted Cruz. I mean, that he borrowed the Democratic attack strategy in order to win the primary and then win the general election. Clearly, it works because it plants that seed in people's mind that even if it's true or not true, it's still in the back of their mind, like,
Mm-hmm.
is Ted Cruz lying Ted or isn't he? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so what ended up happening was that this all came around because of criticism of John MacArthur and Phil Johnson. In all reality, this came out of the interfaith dialogue conversation. And because I wasn't backing down, they started doing opposition research and found this angle that they could try to attack me with from something that was years old based off of a family member. And it's literally a borrowed attack strategy from the left and essentially Donald Trump in order to try to discredit me, so that way my opinions on interfaith dialogue and MacArthur's position on social justice and things like that are no longer valid, as if that discredits the content of what I'm saying. And so for me, I just decided I'm just going to keep plugging away. I'm just going to do what I do. They can keep doing that. I know I'm never going to convince them otherwise. And that's just the reality of it. But I do think that having this kind of a conversation with you, where even you can ask questions and I can answer and that sort of thing, hopefully will allow people to kind of think through it a little bit more. Whether they change their mind or not, that's totally up to them. Everybody has their own convictions.
Right. Now, and I will say this too, you have to do quite a bit of research. And I mean, hey, you should feel really good about yourself, Jeff, if the only thing they could find was something from 6 or 7 years ago of your uncle-in-law in a past employment. I mean, I'm guessing that normally they find some stuff before that on most people.
Yeah.
So that's pretty big. And also just to point this out too, it is a logical fallacy to discredit the teller of the information instead of just looking at the information. And to look at this, because we get criticized all the time that we never liked John MacArthur. John MacArthur could come out and say his favorite color is red, and we would go and say that's a sin. Is what some people would go and say.
Right.
His favorite color is red. He's a communist. That's what that means.
There you
right?
go. Yeah.
But I mean, I have plenty of good things that I can say about John MacArthur and have said about John MacArthur. But I have things that I disagree with John MacArthur, and I think it's the content that needs to be looked at on the basis of something. I look at it and I go, when it comes to social justice, I honestly think that some of the best statements that have been made on social justice were in MacArthur's first 4 blog posts on social justice, when he said it's the greatest threat to the gospel today. Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yep.
I disagree with his actions and some of the things that he said after that. I disagree with some of his doctrines or as to these things. But I'm going, I will give him credit and say that was an incredible statement. That was something that spurred me on in that statement, and to go into dig into this deeper.
Yep.
When it comes to this kind of a thing, the thing that I would ask everybody is that you look at what Jeff's saying. Don't discredit him because of his uncle-in-law, because that's just silly. I mean, it's hard to take these kind of claims seriously from this kind of a thing, because I'm just going, I just want to go into full Ben Shapiro mode and destroy these people.
Yeah.
But then I'm not as smart as Ben Shapiro, so I can't. But yeah, this is I don't know. I think this is something that's gotten blown way out of proportion.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's just like when did family members that aren't in active ministry become a part of dealing with a theological debate? That's the thing that has been surprising to me. Like we always say, like in politics, how horrific it is when people go after spouses and children of like candidates, right? And they're supposed to be off limits. And every time around, somebody goes for the low blow and they say something disgusting about a family member. Mm-hmm. Why is that off limits for politics, but not for the church? You know what I mean? Like, and especially when you're dealing with like extended family members and in-laws and things like that, is how in the world does anybody think that kind of thing is okay? And the other side of it too, as we're kind of dealing with this, is, to me, if you believe that Carl is sinning, that's a Matthew 18 moment. He's not a public teacher that's doing public statements on theology and he's teaching false doctrine or something like that would warrant public condemnation of, let's say he's preaching a false gospel. Yeah, you should publicly confront. If he's preaching a false gospel publicly and training people, you should publicly confront that, so that way you can protect other people from following in his footsteps and following what he's teaching. But if you believe that he's sinning in how he's conducting business, that's a Matthew 18 moment. You should be going to him first. If he doesn't repent, you bring somebody else. If he doesn't repent, then you go to his elders, and then the elders take it before the congregation. That's what you're supposed to do when it comes to personal sin issues. But for some reason, here, that no longer applies. And I'm not really sure why, but we have to look, what does the Bible say, and how do we obey the Bible? The Bible clearly says on these kinds of sin issues, Matthew 18 applies. I don't know why it doesn't anymore. Right.
Well, Matthew 18 has been thrown out the window with a lot of the rest of the Bible, unfortunately, in our culture today, in our Christian culture. And I think that's a really valid point to make, too, because one thing that people would say, well, why can you attack MacArthur? In fact, actually, I have seen this on Twitter. Why can you guys go after MacArthur and we can't go after Carl? And I'm going, well, and people have asked me, and I said, I really don't care about an event center in California. I'm in Iowa, and I've never heard of this event center other than here through these Twitter things. I'm going like, I really don't care about the issue. But the big thing is looking at it as Carl isn't. If you're preaching at these events, hey, have at it. I'm guessing the GK might even go and say something. I'm not sure.
Or let's just even say, let's say he wrote a book on how to do evangelism this way, and then he went out and was going on podcasts and being a guest and writing and having a website to train other people in order to do evangelism by starting freak shows all across the country. Yes, confront it, because now what he's doing is he's trying to take what you believe to be sin, which it may be if you're doing it as an actual ministry, then what you're doing is you need to condemn that, so that way other people don't follow in those footsteps. But if he's just over here and he's doing something wrong in his own business, that's when it becomes Matthew 18. It's not like he's going out with a book trying to train people on how to do this. So that's where it's a personal thing, not a public statement from a pulpit.
Yep, I agree 100% on that, and that's what I'd encourage people to do, is to contact Carl if they do have an issue. I know that there are apparently quite a few people on Twitter who do have an issue, because they tell me about it every week. And
according to Carl, last I talked to him, no phone calls, no emails, no Facebook messages, nada.
Right, and I think that this needs to be made clear too. So you endorse the salvation of Carl?
Yes.
Do you endorse the CIA as a Christian organization?
Not as a Christian organization. I don't even think he would.
Okay, because that's what I'm looking at, because like I'm going, when I say endorsement, I'm going. Yeah. I'm sure you probably endorse it as the best freak show there is out there.
Yeah, that would be like endorsing a movie theater.
Right.
Like,
who endorses movie theaters? Yeah. Yeah. And
again, I'll just say this too. We also have to remember, he started this when he wasn't necessarily walking with Christ, and then he started walking with Christ, and then he realized, why don't I try to reach these people that are already coming to my place? Like it's not like he started it as an evangelistic method.
Right. And I can totally understand where people would disagree. In fact, like I said, I would personally have a disagreement with this, of going, I wouldn't do it that way. I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. I'm going, no. I've reached people on carnivals. I can't say I've reached people who are in freak shows, but I've reached people who are on carnivals, which is very much associated with freak shows and different things like that. I've led people to the Lord. Okay. On carnivals. So, I mean, I have some crossover. I have some disagreement with this, but I also have a lot of disagreement with a lot of other ways people do evangelism too. And I still do recognize, just because I wouldn't do it that way doesn't mean that God can't use that. I still sin sometimes in front of people. I lose my temper or something like that. And God can still use that. And that, like I said, it's not a justification of sin, but I'm going, we all have to realize there is a reason we do something the way that we do it, and there are things that we disagree with. That doesn't mean that we sit there and we call out everybody's person who has a uncle-in-law who does an evangelistic method a way that we would disagree with, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, agreed.
But, all right, well, I think that's about all we got time for here, so we'll have to save the Bigfoot conversation for another time. But
cliffhanger.
Yeah, cliffhanger. Thanks for coming to Conversations with Jeff. I totally forget your sign off, Jeff, so I'll let you do it.
I feel like I change it up every time. So, but yeah, make sure that you follow Sam on Twitter, Facebook, Shining Light Podcast, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you guys are listening every week, because, and again, I say this over and over, but I'm going to say it to your face, is that the thing that I appreciate about Shining Light Podcast is they take complicated issues, they make it simple for everybody to understand. And, you know, like even going through like dispensationalism, which ends up it very easily being very complicated, and you and Patrick find a way to make it really simple. So make sure you guys are tuning in and listen to them twice a week, every week. Well, praise the Lord. That's awesome. Glad for that. And I'm going to take that as an endorsement, since we're talking about endorsements all the time. There you go. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get some backlash for that. Yeah. Well, and one more that they're going to throw out here. This is a terrible way to end a podcast. I always love throwing those kind of things. We might as well. Let's go for it. Yeah. Yeah. Socialinjusticebook.com. Yes. Go there, pre-order, put Jeff down for the code, and you get a free audiobook. Or Sam, we could actually have a contest here and see who gets more codes after this podcast, and we'll see what happens. See, now I'm going to go buy a bunch of books. Yeah, using your own code. Yeah, using my own code. Yeah, that would not be very beneficial. But, yeah, but also when it comes to this book, the thing that is really important is that we were able to put together a great solid team of authors that are all experts in their field to each write a chapter in this book. So that way it's not just me talking, it's not just Sam talking, it's 12 different people that are all experts. So definitely pre-order. The book should be ready into the summer, and it'll be as in-depth as probably you can possibly get on social justice, so you really understand it. Yeah, I'm excited to read it. I'm thrilled. So go ahead, check it out. Once again, that's socialinjusticebook.com, or you could just go to Gatekeeper's website, and it's right there. Yep. Either one. Either way works. Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, and you have a great day. Thanks for having me on, Sam. Yeah, I love hosting you on Conversations with Jeff.